this contract was to the National Land Agency and Geoland Title Limited. There's also the award of a contract for the construction of a processing facility in the Essex Valley Agricultural Development Project area, and this award was for $4,312 US, and it was to Quality Plus Constructing Company Limited. We also had the award of a contract for the provision of a security guard services for the University of Technology of Jamaica to the tune of $210 million to King Alarm Services Limited, and also an award by the Port Authority of Jamaica for the construction of a dual entry exit at the Montego Bay Cargo Terminal in St. James, and this was for $66 million to S&G Road Surfacing Materials Limited. There was also the award of a contract for the procurement and distribution of grade 4 to 6 language arts books for students at the primary level under the Ministry of Education's primary textbook program for the academic year 2023-2024, and this was to Book Zone Limited for $323 million. And we also had similarly the award and distribution of grade 4 to 6 science books to students at the primary level for 2023-2024 to Carlong Publishers Limited for, I think this is $1.8 million US. And the further award to Kingston Bookshop for $301 million. I think there was an error with the US dollar above. I'll correct that. To Kingston Bookshops for $301 million for textbooks for 2023-2024 for social studies for primary school students. And finally, award of contract by the Northeast Regional Health Authority for the construction of a special care nursery at the Onato Bay Hospital, and this was for $130 million to Senetech Engineering Solutions Limited. Those are some decisions and appointments by the Cabinet, and as we had committed earlier, Minister Kamina Johnson-Smith is also here. She's the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, and she'll be making a presentation, and we'll both be taking your questions after her presentation is complete. Minister Johnson-Smith.
Thank you, Minister Morgan. Members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you. I'm pleased to have been invited this morning to address this briefing and to share the work being undertaken by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade to actively safeguard Jamaica's interests and contribute to national development. I'd like to start, however, by addressing a few matters of current interest in the public domain, namely the illegal migration of our nationals, deep seabed mining, and our support of Mexico's suit against American arms manufacturers. On the first matter, illegal migration, I just want to say with regards to reports which have been in the public domain on this regard, I want to reiterate that we are quite clear and confident that the majority of our travelers to these locations are lawful and traveling for legitimate purposes. The government of Jamaica, however, does continue to consult at varying different levels with our partners in Belize, Mexico, and Panama. We are very concerned that Jamaicans are taking decisions to travel in circumstances that are extremely risky, and in some cases taking children with them, exposing them to dangerous situations including kidnapping, trafficking, and even death. I know that some of you would have read in a particular publication this morning that the government of Panama and the US are taking steps to tighten patrol and movement through a particular routing, which they have identified as a route for illegal migrants. And we are trying to be proactive and bring to the attention of Jamaicans that this is not a good decision to take. It is extremely risky for you personally, but it also affects the reputation of our passport, which we have been working hard at strengthening. We're increasing the security within the passport, embedded in the passport, to ensure that it cannot be replicated, that our border control procedures are stronger, our customs processes are stronger. All of these things are to seek greater facilitation of movement with a Jamaican passport. And actions and decisions like this, they really do fight against the efforts of the government, and they do affect the reputation of the passport and the immigration experience of our lawful travelers. While, again, I want to emphasize that the majority of our travelers are lawful and legitimate, we want to really ask Jamaicans to think, while this matter is at this I would say, comparatively small numbers, when we look at some of the other persons within the region that are using Central American routes to try to transit elsewhere. While our numbers are relatively small, we do not want the immigration experience of our lawful travelers to get worse. We want our athletes, we want our entrepreneurs, we want our family members, we want just the ordinary Jamaican traveler seeking to exercise their right to travel to do so without difficulty, in comfort and with dignity. And part of that is our fellow citizens taking sound decisions about traveling lawfully. So we wanted to reiterate that call this morning, and also, as I had mentioned previously, that we're still trying to sort through data. We had received some data from Mexico and Panama, but we have only had it just recently validated by PICA. So we're able to share this morning that according to PICA's latest statistics, between 2018 and the 31st of March this year, 143 Jamaicans were refused entry into Mexico. And in the case of Panama, for the same period, 2,167 Jamaicans were refused entry and 81 Jamaicans deported from Panama. So we recognize that there are no direct flights to Mexico. So Panama is the route, both to Mexico and to Belize, and that Panama is therefore that very first point of entry. And they have clearly implemented heightened immigration surveillance, and therefore this is affecting both people who know they were traveling with unlawful intent, and they are able to, or rather their immigration officials are being trained in how to recognize when people have clearly been coached in how to address their immigration interviews, and it is also affecting persons who are traveling lawfully. And we want you to keep this in mind, because as much as we try to build relationships and keep strong friendships and lines of communication with our partner countries, these types of decisions can impact on our lawful travel. So we want to just really remind Jamaicans to think long and hard before they take these decisions, not only for personal safety, but with a view to the bigger picture. We still do not have validated Belize figures. We only have figures that have been provided by Belize. We do not have PICA validated figures as yet, and when we have those, we will share them as well so that there can be a sense. Again, you can see that the numbers are not massive when you consider what's happening generally in Central and South America, but it is still cause for concern for us, relatively speaking, and one which we're seeking to bring to attention. On the matter of deep seabed mining, there has been mounting scrutiny and increased public discourse in the context of the International Seabed Authority's work in relation to deep seabed mining. And in its role as regulator, and Jamaica is very proud to be the only developing country to host an international organization, which we do in respect of the Seabed Authority. We are very proud that Jamaica was one of the leading countries in establishing the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, which is, quote unquote, the constitution of the oceans. So we take our responsibility in respect of these matters very, very seriously. So as a member of the Council and as a sponsoring state, Jamaica is actively involved in the discussions which are underway, as are other small states. We want to just take this opportunity for the government of Jamaica to reassure the public that protection of our marine environment is of paramount importance to this government. And as there are many widely held misunderstandings about deep seabed mining, we wanted to clarify just two important points which help to contextualize some of the discussion which we hear. One is that deep seabed mining will not start, and the government of Jamaica will certainly not agree to the commencement of deep seabed mining until the relevant regulatory framework, which includes protection of the marine environment, is in place. And that work is work which is underway, but we are not at all clear on when those regulations are likely to be finalized. So this is not something which is imminent, and we'd like people to understand that as well. Very deep technical work is being undertaken to make sure that the regulations will protect our marine environment. So this is work that continues. And the second, when they discuss deep seabed mining, people hear the phrase the area for deep seabed mining, and they presume that this is the harbor or just off the coast or somewhere close by. We want to make it clear that the area is actually defined within the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. It is the area way beyond national jurisdiction of any country. There are geographically defined areas that are beyond the 227 square kilometers that surround every country as their economic, their EEZ. So they are way beyond not only Jamaica's waters, Jamaica's coast, Jamaica's deep sea bed, but beyond that of any country. So again, when these matters are being discussed, these two issues should always be kept front of mind as the context for further questions and further discussions. On the third matter, Mexico's arms appeal, Jamaica has long recognized the high percentage of murders committed by the gun in our country, and the fact that most of these guns are illegal. We have been taking steps domestically in different fora to address the issue of gun crimes, but we have also been looking beyond our borders. You might recall that in delivering Jamaica's national policy statement at the UN General Assembly last year, Prime Minister Holness called for an international war on guns in the same way that, quote, Western governments had declared an international war on drugs, in the sense of pulling all their resources, all their vigilance, and all their mechanisms and levers of power to try to restrict them. We have supported focusing on trafficking in guns in other multilateral and regional fora, consistent with Jamaica's long-standing foreign policy association, with positions in support of regional and international peace and security, including those geared at reducing trafficking in small arms and light weapons. So we are not alone and have not been alone in recognizing that our national rate of murder and shootings are seriously impacted by international trafficking in guns. And in this context, the government of Mexico invited the government of Jamaica, among other countries, to file what is called an amicus curiae brief in support of their appeal case against American-based gun manufacturers. And we have taken the decision to so do. The government of Mexico had filed this suit against well-known gun manufacturers in August 2021. Their case was kicked out on a technicality, and it is now on appeal. And it is now that ourselves and 5 other CARICOM members have joined this amicus brief, which means you're friends of the case. So the government of Jamaica does not bear any financial responsibility for the prosecution of the case, but we do have the ability to include our position in respect of the relationship between illegal guns and our murder rate and our shooting rates in Jamaica. So a ruling in Mexico's favor would cause gun-making companies to implement procedures that constrain the ease with which persons can traffic arms. We would just restate the position that the case is not against the government of the United States of America. It is not in respect of the U.S. or rather Americans' constitutional rights to bear arms or to purchase arms. It is against gun manufacturers and the practices which they undertake in their trade of and sale of guns. Just want to also touch on a few of the ministry's achievements, because it's always important to try to remind and educate the public about what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade does. Because of the nature of the work, it is often misunderstood or only spoken about when there is a matter of controversy, which is, I think, does a disservice to one of the smallest and most hardworking ministries that I will say, although yes, I am biased, within the government of Jamaica. The first area that I just want to touch on in respect of consular services is to share that since we implemented apostilles, which is the authentication process whereby overseas countries and recognize Jamaican official documents and vice versa, since we implemented this less expensive and more efficient process, we have actually delivered more than 5,000 apostilles to persons, and we're looking at ways to make the system more efficient, more effective, because one of the things that we've actually discovered is as Jamaica is pursued more as a wedding destination, more people are asking about how to get their apostille more quickly for their marriage certificates, and the Ministry of Tourism is trying to encourage us as they are trying to build us as a wedding destination. So that's just one small example of the ways in which apostilles are used. It was just a year ago in March that we repatriated 20 students who were impacted by, or whose studies were impacted by the war in Ukraine following Russia's invasion. And we wanted to share that on their return, most of them, or many of them, had continued their studies online, because having the educational institutions having fully recognized that the war would in fact prevent continuation of studies in the way that they had hoped and had intended them to be continued, which was in person. Several of those students continued their studies online, and the ministry not only supported in referrals for counseling and support, as they had been through significant trauma, but we also secured free of charge copy documentation from the RGD that they would have needed, because documents would have been left behind in Ukraine, as well as receiving free translations of, again, critical personal documents that would have been issued in Ukraine, but which could not be used in Jamaica, and ultimately in helping to retrieve transcripts with the assistance of a Ukraine national who we authorized to be able to approach and engage with the educational institutions. And this we did through engagements with our counterparts in Ukraine and with the educational institutions through our mission in Germany. I wanted to share that within the consular mandate, of course, we have continued to support the repatriation of fishermen detained in other countries. There are not always large numbers of fishermen that require an entire vessel to be sent, as we have seen with the Nanny of the Maroons and other JDF Coast Guard vessels that have been sent out. Assistance for students whose privately made arrangements have fallen through. For example, recently, there were students attending a conference, and quite a number, and apparently one teacher made an arrangement, canceled it in favor of another one, and the students were left without any accommodation and support. And it was our Consul General who was asked to assist, and who did manage to find accommodation of an appropriate level and comfortable level to allow the students to be able to take advantage of the excellent developmental opportunity that they had traveled to experience. And this is the type of thing that we're often called upon to do. It was not a ministry organized trip, but it is, when we are called on to assist, we do our very best. And this was done with some support from the diaspora as well, as they are always willing to jump in and help where necessary. We continue, of course, to facilitate the conduct of remote testimonies through our missions. Again, You would recognize that some years ago the Evidence Act was changed to allow for persons, whether they are in witness protection or it's a sensitive case, or they have simply, they live overseas and their case or the crime or the matter occurred in Jamaica. They can now give evidence through our missions, and this is quite heavy, both for public and private bar, quite a heavy use of our facilities in this regard. And all of this is in addition to the traditional facilitation of passports, visas, and citizens' applications, payment of pensions overseas. Yes, this happens through us as well. Issuance of no objection letters for teachers and nurses who migrate to work overseas, and welfare support to nationals in other situations of distress. We've had an increased incidence of persons in scholarship who have mental breakdowns, and I know you can only imagine the difficulties in trying to repatriate persons who are not in their best circumstances, and where families, of course, are unable to assist in that regard. With respect to the diaspora, we successfully staged the 9th biannual Jamaica 60 Diaspora Conference in June last year, had a record 5,000 attendees online, and the diaspora policy, of course, has now been tabled as a white paper, and the action plan is being worked on. The newly elected officers of the Global Jamaica Diaspora Council and the Global Jamaica Diaspora Youth Council will have their first full meetings with the Minister of State this week, and we'll look forward to starting off this new process of engagement through these formal mechanisms. In relation to bilateral relations, last year we established diplomatic relations with 5 new countries, so that we now have diplomatic relations with 174 of the 193 members of the United Nations. And in our milestone 60th anniversary year, we of course welcomed heads of state from Rwanda and India, as well as my counterpart foreign minister from Nigeria, and high-level delegations from Namibia, the USA, and South Africa. In addition, we had high-level meetings with 16 other countries and supported 2 working and official visits of the Prime Minister, one to Trinidad and Tobago for their independence, and the other to the United States of America. And just reminding that we signed the trade complaints mechanism with Trinidad and Tobago to assist our business sector with ensuring that where they have issues in exporting to Trinidad and Tobago, there is an effective and efficient escalation process for that. We continue to build relationships and leverage political partnerships to ensure that we are able to support Jamaica's national development goals and to address concerns when they exist. Our health sector has been a major beneficiary of these relationships, not only through the close to 1 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines secured from different countries, including many countries who offered and we were unable to take them on, but as well as medical equipment and supplies valued at hundreds of millions of dollars from various countries, including the UK, the EU, and members of the EU, France, and of course India and the Republic of Korea. In support of agriculture, just to give another example, we facilitated a donation of 1,200 tons of premium fertilizer, which was provided to small farmers across the island at a most critical time, which is, of course, when the war in Ukraine broke out, there was an immediate shortage of fertilizers globally. So for us to be able to secure 1,200 tons of fertilizer was a major part in being able to facilitate growth in the agricultural sector, notwithstanding the global shortages. In the multilateral sphere, we've, of course, due to our balanced, credible, and principled voice, we were elected to the International Civil Aviation Authority Organization, ICAO, as well as Vice President of the 77th session of the UN General Assembly. And we have secured support for Jamaica's initiative in the UN for the official designation of February 17 annually as Global Tourism Resilience Day. Jamaica is also coordinating CARICOM's position in the UN treaty negotiation on cybersecurity. So this is the work that happens every day, that is unsung, that is uncontroversial, and that may not necessarily directly impact our individual lives, but set a global stage for Jamaica's participation, Jamaica's voice in ensuring that the voice of small island developing states is at the forefront and at the core of these discussions. With regards to the CSME, we're playing our part in ensuring that domestic workers, agricultural workers, and private security officers are closer to benefiting from legal free movement of skilled nationals within the CSME framework. And this work continues, of course, supported by our work in COTED, in which we seek the most favorable treatment for Jamaican goods, including what is now a bit of a knotty issue with condensed milk. There is far more that I can share about our economic diplomacy program, about our leadership role within the WTO in the 12th ministerial session last year, and the work that's now continuing towards the 13th ministerial conference, which will take place early next year. I can speak more about exciting things that we have upcoming in 2023, but I think we will do that on another occasion. Suffice it to say that I'm extremely proud that the team at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade has continued to ensure that Jamaica enjoys a high-profile and positive international reputation, evidenced by the number of engagements, interactions, and tangible outcomes which have resulted from our robust foreign policy and solidified our contributions to the national growth agenda. So thank you very much for your time and attention. Minister, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Minister. Very comprehensive, if not, well, not comprehensive, because you have so many things that you could have said that you didn't. But I'm sure the media is very grateful, because I trust that they were not aware of several of the achievements and activities of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. And I would also like to welcome your worthy permanent secretary. It's so good for you to grace the office of the Prime Minister. Thank you very much. And also members of your team from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you very much for joining us. We will now take your questions, whether to myself or to the Minister, on whatever matter that you consider important. You may signal your interest in asking a question by raising your hand, and someone will present you with a microphone. You can start by introducing yourself and your media house.
Good morning. I'm Mr. Shauna Small. I'm from the Jamaica Gleaner.
Thank you very much.
My question is for the Minister Johnson Smith. Minister Smith, are you aware of how many Jamaicans are being held in U.S. detention centers? And has the U.S. contacted Jamaica with concerns about nationals traveling to its borders illegally? Also, how concerned is the government about the different factors driving the number of Jamaicans?
Hold on, Mrs. Small. Maybe you could give us one at a time.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
Okay, the first question is,
thank you.
Are you aware of how many Jamaicans are being held in U.S. detention centers?
No. That is information that I can get because it is a figure which is a changing one. But we do know that there is a regular returning program from the United States, which seems to be supported by, again, illegal migration and other activities. So we know that there are several Jamaicans in different detention centers across the U.S., but we don't have the number. I can try and get a number for you, though.
Is there a specific definition for detention centers? Because one would suspect that there are several classifications.
Well, there's detention and there is correctional, but you asked about detention, so we would have to make that inquiry. Yeah.
The second question is, has the U.S. contacted Jamaica about concerns about Jamaicans traveling to its borders illegally?
No, it has not.
Okay. The third question, how concerned is the government about the different factors driving Jamaicans to attempt to flee the country illegally?
Well, we are concerned. The government of Jamaica recognizes that we have always been a migratory people. Jamaicans have always gone overseas to seek opportunities. This is from the Windrush days. In fact, even before Windrush, before the Windrush generation, we have always sought to seek other opportunities. And we therefore recognize that there's much positive opportunity, and Jamaica has in fact exported a lot of its human capital in this regard. A lot of our diaspora overseas contributes significantly to the growth and development of their chosen host countries. We have strong and well-developed seasonal work programs that also assist for safe and orderly pursuit of work opportunities overseas, both in hospitality and agricultural sectors. And we have been seeking also to ensure that the domestic environment continues to be one which provides opportunity. This is why, for example, we've removed all of the fees and tuition fees and administrative fees for young people to attend the HEART NSTA, for them to seek certification and training so that they can too pursue opportunities here. We have implemented a new social housing program for those persons who are still not sufficiently able to access the reduced rates with the national offered by the National Housing Trust. So there are opportunities which are available to access housing for the indigent. We have sought to ensure that there are more social programs to deal with community socialization, not only community policing, but youth clubs and information centers that allow for persons to have training and mentoring that allows them to see a better way. This is the very tip of the iceberg in terms of understanding how we change the availability of opportunities here. We are seeking to expand the global services sector so that the BPO jobs which are available are also expanded and moved up the value chain to ensure that we're able to employ more accountants, more lawyers. I'm not sure these are necessarily the persons who are taking these high-risk routes, but we want to ensure that everyone has an opportunity. So we are calling on persons to attend the closest HEART NSTA location within your community or close by and see what courses are available. They are not only the traditional courses. We're offering coding, we're offering tech. There's going to be a new program that even provides a stipend for a set number of high school graduates that have matriculated but are unable to enter tertiary education. We're, of course, always looking at the funding of tertiary education and how it is that we can do better or more. So we are concerned. We are recognizing that there are issues, but we are seeking to address them in a holistic way.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you very much, Minister. I just wanted to mention something that the Minister said. When the Prime Minister spoke in Parliament, he announced a very important program to engage 500 high school graduates, whether it be sixth form or fifth form, and it would be an internship program, a paid internship program, where they would get a bank account, they would also get driver's license, passport, NIS, TRN, all of those things. So what we're trying to do is to give them a good opportunity to become a proper functioning member of the society. Additionally, there's a savings component where at the end of the tenure, during the internship, they will receive $120,000, and the interns will be paid approximately about $70,000 gross per month. This is a very important project, and there was also the expansion of the Jamaica National Service Corps, where we want to bring in more young Jamaicans into the Jamaica National Service Corps. We've had a very successful run with the Service Corps over the past 5 years, and I think it has proved itself as an important aspect in youth intervention and youth empowerment. So those are just some of the things that we are doing. Are there any other questions, Naomi?
Hi, morning, Minister.
Is that Mr. Hall from the Observer?
Arthur from the Jamaica Observer. One question for you, for Mr. Morgan, and one question for the Foreign Affairs Minister. Quick question for you, Mr. Morgan. You announced 2 contracts for security guard companies today. Have these companies met the guidelines established by the Ministry of Finance recently?
Well, whether they meet the guidelines or not is immaterial. The Minister of Finance has announced that anyone who does not acquiesce to the ruling, the government will not continue engaging with them. So that is a hard line that the government has taken. And I think, Arthur, I want to speak a little bit more about that. It is one of the most significant transformations in labor relations in Jamaica. The fact that we're now able to move over 40,000 people, because the number moves between 25 and 40,000 because it's a very transient industry. We're now able to move over 40,000 people to, for example, get an NHT benefit. They can now get proper pension and health care. They can now pay education, tax, and all of those obligations to make them a part of the society, to make them a part of the economy. In a respect of other word that he used called smadification. You know, there has been for too long, many of our security guards have been left outside of the society, and they have complained about it. And I think the government is really happy that we're now in a position where, even though there are challenges, we can work towards bringing them in so that they can get the benefits that they deserve as Jamaicans. And we're also very happy that so many of the security companies are recognizing the importance of making these security guards employees. There will be challenges, as we see, with any major shift in labor relations. There will be teething pains. But the government is very cognizant of what is happening. We're very conscious of the concerns on both sides. And I assure you that the Cabinet and the Minister of Labour and Social Security are very focused on it and working to make sure that those are ironed out.
Minister, in all you have said, you have not answered my question. Has the 2 contracts that you announced today, approved by Cabinet, have those companies satisfied the conditions outlined by the Minister of Finance? Can you say that is yes?
I cannot speak specifically to these 2 companies, but what I can say to you is that the government has made a policy decision, and the Ministry of Finance has articulated it, that any company that does not acquiesce to the change in the situation will not be engaged by the government. So one would expect that in the process of engaging these companies, that due diligence would be done to ensure that they are acquiescent with the court ruling.
Thank you, Minister. And for Minister Johnson Smith, you said your junior minister will meet with the newly elected members of the Diaspora Council this week. 100 people voted, or 3,000. There are questions about the number of persons who voted in that election. The ministry said 3,000. There are critics that say it's less than 100. Can you say what the number is correctly, Minister?
Well, I generally trust my ministry figures because I don't know from whence the other figures come. I know that there have been some negative comments that were in the public domain about the election process. And I would simply say to persons who are critical to recognize that this is an entirely new framework for engagement and expansion of our engagement with the diaspora. We have 2 new formal processes. In fact, in 2019, it was the very first time there had been elections across the board held on the first day for the creation of this council that had been approved within the preceding diaspora conference. And the ability to bring new people in from not only traditional locations, but non-traditional locations. And the fact that persons have, since we have done so, notwithstanding all of the challenges through the pandemic, and the fact that our second ever elections were held on the cusp of coming out of a pandemic and trying to operationalize the councils within the timing of a pandemic, that these have not made it a simple process. But the fact that persons on the council and persons within the diaspora are asking for more representation. So for example, within the continent of Africa, they're saying one is not enough, they want more representation because they appreciate the efforts that are being made and they see how they can contribute more, so they want to be a part of it. They think that there should be more from the Middle East, not just one, and they want to say that there should be more from Latin America and the Caribbean, not just one. And I take my inspiration and my sense of the value from the fact that people want to be a part of it. There will always be criticism. I don't think there is one thing that any government can do in any country in the world that doesn't have some basis for criticism, legitimate and less so. But I am very pleased and proud of these new councils. The elections are a new process, and we will continue to work on how they can be improved, ensuring that given that there are administrative challenges in implementing elections of this nature across different continents and within large diasporic locations where even their means of identification is different and their means of engagement is different. So I'm going to trust my ministry numbers in short answer to your question, but I just wanted to give you the context of the wider complexity and the positive perspective of what is actually underway in terms of engagement through those councils. Thank you.
Mr. Hall, I wish to, as a follow-up to your question, in January, the Minister of Finance was at a function, and he was very clear, and I will quote what he said: "A breach of these terms with any respect to any security guard working at any ministry, agency, or department would be grounds for termination of said contract." And it follows on from the decision that on effective April 1, security guards in Jamaica of security firms that have contracts with the government will be recognized as employees and not contractors, which is in keeping with the 2022 court ruling. He also said that security guard firms would be required to make statutory deductions where applicable and guarantee payment for overtime work in accordance with the laws and payments of overtime wages. And I want to repeat that, as I just did, that it's a red line, it's a hard line, it's government policy, and it's something that we're committed to. Do we have any other questions?
Thank you, Minister. Good morning as well to the new and young reporters who are with us, and that includes the young man here who will ask your question next.
Good morning, Alexander Scott, Nationwide News. I have a few questions for both ministers. Minister Morgan, as it relates to Professor Albert, the church and other religious institutions have raised issue, for want of a better word, with his appointments to the Constitutional Reform Committee. Just wondering if the government is giving any thought to removing him from the post.
Well, that's a matter that the Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs will address. I have had conversations with her. She's currently on overseas at important meetings, and she will return and address it. There's only one point, and I listened to your radio program's very spirited debate with Matondo Makulo and the Reverend Gentleman this morning. The issue that consumes the conversation is not a matter that is being contemplated by the government. The government has not articulated that this constitutional reform process will disturb such wide ranges of issues, our intention, as articulated by the Prime Minister, is pretty much to focus on the Republic status of Jamaica. And insofar as the committee that we have assembled, which is representative of a wide cross-section of interest, there are members of the church, there is a youth advisor on it, there are members of the opposition, there are constitutional lawyers, members of government, legislators. And I think that in bringing the committee together, the government was very cognizant of getting the views of a wide cross-section, including the church. And I don't suspect that any, as the church may contemplate, or as this particular representative of the church may contemplate, that there will be anyone who can dominate a debate or a conversation on the committee, because give credit to those on the committee, they are very strong individuals of intellect, competence, and consequence. So I just generally, not speaking specifically to that individual, Jamaicans can be assured that the committee was formed in the best interest of our society for its better future. So we're not really, the minister will speak more about it. You had another question.
Yes, thank you. A few months back, I believe it was, Minister Samuda, Carl Samuda, Labour Minister, had received a document, a study for the overseas farm workers in Canada, allegations of abuse and things of that nature. I was just wondering at what stage that report is, whether it's ready to be tabled in Parliament, whether Cabinet has seen it, and if it hasn't been tabled in Parliament, when we can expect it to be tabled.
All right, so I'll have to ask Minister Samuda a little bit more about that, but what I can say based on, because I had some knowledge of the report, and I know Minister Samuda has more details, but where issues were raised, even as the inquiries were being made, the solutions to those issues were being implemented. One of the things that we're happy for is the responsiveness of the Ministry of Labour and Social Security. So obviously there are going to be issues whenever people travel overseas to engage in work. And that's why we have a very strong liaison service. And we also have a responsive minister and a responsive government. So upon hearing of questions and challenges by farm workers, we assembled very quickly some very competent persons. Helene Davis White was one of them, to travel to Canada to examine the circumstances. And one of the things that we found was that while there are concerns, there are also majority positives in the situations of the workers there. A lot of the workers were very happy with the circumstances that they were living under. But where the challenges were identified, action was taken immediately. So you may get a report that gives you historical context of what was happening, but even before the final report was done, or even before we have reached the stage of the final report, a lot of the issues that were identified, such as living conditions, such as employer-employee relationships, were resolved.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexander. Do we have any other questions?
Morning, Minister. Hal Shane Burke, Radio Jamaica News.
Welcome, Al Shane.
Thank you. Going back to the issue of the security guards. Now, with the foregoing about working towards and the government taking keen interest in what is happening, but what do you say to the security guards who are being forced to sign contracts and they are now out of a job? They have no recourse. There is no money coming into them because of the contracts which they are now being asked to sign. So what is the government doing? You're saying you're interested in them, but they are those who are right now out of a job.
All right, so the first thing I want to say is it's very difficult for me to answer a question based on, without a full understanding of the extent and circumstances of the reality that you are seeking to articulate. So yes, there have been statements in the public domain that security guards are being forced to sign contracts. But we don't know how many have been forced. There's also a process by which you can get restitution through the Ministry of Labor, through various means. We're a country of laws. And while the government has a duty to protect its citizens and to ensure that the rights for all, the citizen also has a duty to protect their own rights. So one of the advice that we always give to persons who are engaged in labor disputes is engage legal representation, which I know of in the past that security guards have engaged legal representation and gotten proper restitutions in the court. I am not aware that in this case the matter rises to that level. But there's also the Ministry of Labor. There is a process by which persons can formally engage with the Ministry of Labor. They can write letters to the Ministry of Labor. They can seek meetings. They can go to the Industrial Disputes Tribunal. There are numerous. Jamaica is a country where labor law is one of the more mature areas of law, and where the rights of workers is held prominent by the courts and the society. So the advice we would give, because in many cases the government cannot necessarily intervene in a contract between an employer and an employee unless the employee seeks that intervention, because contracts are private, negotiated arrangements between an employer and an employee. So if the government is unaware of, one, the extent, two, the nature of the challenge that the workers are facing, and if the workers do not come through the various channels that are set up to seek redress, then it's very difficult for me as a minister with responsibility for information to give you a real substantive response to your question.
To Minister Johnson-Smith, do we have a breakdown of the demographics of the individuals who are being detained or returned from Panama, that sort of thing?
When you say demographics, gender, I would have to check with PICA because they give quite generic and block data in this regard, the number of Jamaica nationals and residents. That tends to be how they classify. This information is treated very sensitively. As a matter of fact, even in respect of the question regarding detentions earlier, many detainees don't even want their families to know they have been detained. They don't share information. Sometimes they don't admit to their nationality because verification is all a part of the return process. And sometimes they just try and hold out on information for as long as they can. So being aware, people are very sensitive about that type of information. So we have block numbers. I can probably get them broken down into gender. But that's probably where it will end. If you're interested, we can request that breakdown.
Thank you, Minister. I think we have time for one more question.
All right, good morning again, Minister Morgan. What is the status of the Cabinet Secretary, and are there still attempts to fill this position?
Well, as you would know, as the Gleaners cover this matter extensively, the process for a cabinet secretary is controlled by the Public Services Commission, not a minister or anybody in the executive. What I am aware of, and I can speak very vaguely on it, as it is not within the remit of the executive, is that the process continues. Ambassador Saunders is still in the chair. But I think that very soon the public may be made aware of how far the process has gone as it relates to the appointment of a new cabinet secretary. That's as much as I can give you, as it is not in my remit.
Final question, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, Minister Johnson-Smith, Senator Johnson-Smith, final question to you. Haiti. What is the status and timeline of Jamaica acting as host to both the government and the opposition parties to discuss transitioning that country to both elections and a transitional government for that process? Yeah.
Thank you very much for that question. Discussions and background work still continues in respect of the best possible way for CARICOM to support a good office's role to expand the consensus that currently exists within that country, that as a foundation for greater consensus. We continue to engage within the context of the CARICOM heads. Jamaica is one of the lead heads on the issue, and we continue to engage with external third-party countries such as Canada on how it is that we will best engage in that, as well as in respect of the other elements of support which we indicated that we would provide. So in respect of a meeting in particular, there is no current, there are no current fixed plans for such a meeting. We're still assessing the best way to intervene, although we have maintained our willingness to host such a meeting. Thank you.
And starting on time, ending on time, it's now 9:29. I want to thank the Minister and her team for attending upon this post-cabinet press briefing. Also want to thank members of the media for your attendance and your questions. And also thank you to the team here at OPM, as well as our support team from PBCJ and the Jamaica Information Service. There are some refreshments outside for those who are interested. And stay tuned for another installation of the post-cabinet press briefing to be announced. Thank you very much.
I must of cyberspace. Do not, for fear of being labeled a victim, refuse to report or follow through the process. Once you think that there is something wrong, seek advice. And the easiest way to get that advice is to come to Jamaica CERT or to go to the nearest police station. You will not be looked down upon for being a victim of cybercrime, because it is a matter of when for us all, not if.
To report a cybercrime, call or visit the website of the Jamaica Cyber Incident Response Team or make a report to your nearest police station.
Every Jamaican has the right to know what is happening in Parliament, to know when new laws are being passed, and to give their opinions on legislation before either house.
Every Jamaican has the right to see their representatives in action, making laws, holding the executive to account, representing the people, working for the benefit of all Jamaicans.
It is your right to observe first-hand meetings of the Senate, meetings of the House of Representatives, and the meetings of parliamentary committees. You may also take a tour of your parliament.
To find out more about the Houses of Parliament, please call 876-922-0200, follow us on Instagram and Facebook, or visit our website at www.japarliament.gov.jm.
Let us resolve our family disputes peacefully. A family is a circle of love, support, and strength. Violence has no place.
The proceeding was brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
You'll always remember that day you became a parent. That day, you made yourself a promise to provide for them, to protect them, laugh with them, watch them learn, and let them grow. That day you realized your biggest challenge lies in bringing them up in a world full of choices. That day you knew they would grow up fast, and the innocence you cherish wouldn't last. That day you made up your mind that no matter how things change, you would always take the time to give them parental guidance. That day is today.
Remember, parental controls are available for all devices. A reminder from the Broadcasting Commission.
Remember, gambling is just a game. Choose to gamble responsibly. Set a budget, avoid chasing losses, and stop gambling when you reach your money limit. For gambling help, call RISE 888-991-4146. A message from the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Commission.
Today we're looking at science. Now, I would like to find out from you, what have you been doing to prepare for your science examination? I hope you have been studying and I hope you have been practicing. We'll start this session with a brain teaser. So this is our scenario. A boulder, a cobble, and a pebble are in a gorge, a lake, and a valley. Now listen carefully. The rock in the valley is larger than the cobble. The cobble is not in the lake. Question: where is each rock? So we're going to try to see if we can work out where do we find each rock. So we have prepared a little table for you to help you to place the rock. All right, what would you start with? Okay, so we know that we have all these three types of rocks and they're in a gorge, a lake, and a valley. We are told that the rock in the valley is larger than the cobble. So obviously the cobble is not in the valley. Yes? And we know that the cobble is not in the lake. Good? All right, so let's see if we can find out where do we place each of these rocks.